Oh, pterosaur, how lovely are your pointy teeth. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Christmas special. And of course, it wouldn't be a Christmas bonus special without the magnificent Dr. Dave Home from Creekbury University. There he is, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Don't you love him?
Hopefully some of them do, if they're still Patreons. Thank you for giving us money. Yes.
Yes, indeed. No, it does help. You are brilliant. We thought we had a lot of questions this week from various people, like 8, all about the Tyrannosaur's stomach contents, and we thought we'd open this Christmassy festiveness with talking about toes inside a Tyrannosaur. It's not a very big Tyrannosaur, is that right?
So it's a young Gorgosaurus. So Gorgosaurus is pretty large. Oh God, excuse me. Just had my coffee.
Wow. It's just pretty large, and that's what it does to you. This is why we don't do a live recording very often.
It's a massive mug. Gorgosaurus are adult, 8-9 meters, so a very sizable animal, but not getting into that 8+ ton kind of big T-Rex range. Lived just before, so Alberta, North America, kind of 70-ish million years ago, something like that. And the specimen in question, long-time fans of Dave Hone and Dave Hone's Archosaur Musings blog, this is the specimen Darren Tanky prepped on that blog 10 years ago, and there's like a 35-part live essay of Darren doing photos every couple of days of what he'd done to this specimen. And then halfway through prepping it went, oh, there's something in there. And didn't even tell me, because he wasn't allowed to. But that's been a secret for over a decade, because it's taken them that long to describe the damn thing. But that specimen has been very, very, very well shown online, and it's still there on my blog if you want to go and see it. It's a juvenile, a teenager-ish, so 5-ish meters. I think the mass estimate they gave in the paper was like 300 kilos. You wouldn't want to meet it on a dark night, but, the adults were well over a ton. So, not that big. Here we go. Yeah, so here's one of the articles, and here's the illustration. And then inside it are the partial feet or legs of 2 oviraptorosaurs, a little thing called Cytypes, which doesn't get very big, but these, again, are relatively young juveniles. And if I'm blunt, that fits everything I've been saying about theropod predation and feeding for the last decade, and this is a massive vindication of all of my research, so I'm really quite happy about it. You've got preferential targeting of juveniles of small animals that are much smaller than the predator. There's no direct sign of scavenging. The paper says there's no sign of group hunting, which had been argued for small tyrannosaurs. Foraging with big ones, no, that doesn't fit that pattern at all. So that's really neat. And yeah, the feet show signs of acid etching, so they are consumed. They've been dismembered, so they've been pulled apart at the joints. That's something I've said tyrannosaurs are doing back in 2010. So yes, this is Dave is right 2023 edition as far as I'm concerned. But I've done half a dozen media interviews for this because it's obviously had a lot of attention. It is a really, really cool find. People might remember the Microraptor paper I did almost exactly a year ago. We had a catalogue in there of all of the stomach contents known for theropods. And there's like 8 or 9. There really aren't very many at all. I don't think any of those animals, with the exception of Scipionyx, and actually probably the original Compsognathus, are juveniles, so themselves are not fully adult theropods, so most of them are adults as well. And then those stomach contents are usually of juveniles or little things like fish, lizards, and so on and so forth. But this is, that very rare occasion of a baby dinosaur inside the gut and clearly eaten and almost certainly killed rather than scavenged inside the gut of a bigger one. And so you've got absolutely one-to-one direct evidence. We're very confident this species ate that species, and there's reason to think that it's carnivory and not scavenging. Predation, not scavenging. So, great. Yeah, and that fits the exact model that I've been arguing for, again, since like 2010.
Does that mean that we just think that predators just go after babies? Is that kind of what we're finding out?
It's probably what 90% of them are doing 90% of the time. And okay, those are vague sort of made up numbers, but that's what modern carnivores do. The vast majority of them target things much smaller than themselves, and the vast majority of things that they target that are much smaller than themselves are juveniles. So even there's a great paper I found on, I think it was owls, and even when they were given a choice of a baby rat that was the same size as a mouse, they would go for the baby rat because young animals are less experienced, they're naive, they have different foraging requirements, and that makes them more vulnerable. So it's not just size, it is juvenility which makes things vulnerable. And there are exceptions. Bobcat target adult deer. Weasels famously will take things like rabbits, which are massively bigger than themselves. But again, these are the exception, not the rule. The vast majority of carnivorous animals target stuff half to a quarter of their body size, and then those are usually also juveniles. So this fits with that pattern exactly.
Amazing. So and there's nothing here that the science is good here. It's not the case that this is just an animal that's just sort of died in the same carcass as something else. It's definitely been
no, because you got the acid etching, which is obviously a dead giveaway, and this kind of Alberta formation. This is Dinosaur Park, which we've talked about repeatedly because I spent a fair bit of time there. These are swampy lowlands. Yes, there's some water transport of carcasses, but to have a complete articulated Gorgosaurus and then get feet somehow washed up between the ribs and gastralia, not going to happen.
Fair dues. Well, we now are going to... Actually, one thing we could do, Dave, is talk about the massive plesiosaur. Do you want to talk about the plesiosaur, or is it no thank you?
No, because I don't know anything about it.
Excellent. Let's not do that. Nobody...
We found a big plesiosaur in the UK.
Yeah.
I've seen some photos of a tonking great skull knocking around at the Etches collection. I'm out. That's my knowledge. I don't do marine stuff. I really don't know anything other than that sentence.
There aren't any marine dinosaurs apart from penguins, as far as we know.
Well, we can argue about penguins. about whether or not they're the only one, because you've got various other
swans
lineages that are but they're not marine. But then you've got things like eider ducks, which pretty much don't come into fresh water, I don't think, usually. So, and then how terrestrial are they? But then penguins come out on land, and go and listen to the Kirsten Formoso episode. We argue about that there.
We do. Okay, so, by the way, for those who are interested, I'm going to try and edit it out, kind of, if I can. But if I can't, there is clicking on the line, and we don't know why. It's because in Britain we operate on the 1940s, and so we can hear a slight clicking. But, the information's still good, guys, and I will include a non-clicking MP3 for you to listen to. So, here we go. We're going to start off with Matthew. And Matthew has, do you think that Ashdarkids would have been able to fly with large prey items in their beaks without becoming unbalanced and front-heavy or straining? So the flappy flaps, this is a flappy flap question. Thanks, Dave. Well done. He does that every time I sort of say it. It's a question. I mean, how could they actually carry prey when they flew? Because obviously the thing that they get wrong in the films is they make them pick them up.
Grab with their feet, yeah. Don't know is the short answer. So Ashdarkids are already kind of front heavy and front disbalanced, which is why we think they have this kind of forward swept wing posture in order to shift their centre of lift forwards, to shift their centre of mass, to align with their centre of mass because of the big head and the long neck. Picking something heavy up in their head is not going to be ideal for that exact reason. Because again, it's not just, it's like a seesaw. It's not just the weight. It's the fact that it's right at the end really exaggerates it. And on longer necked ones, so Quetzalcoatlus is pretty long necked. Some of the other stuff is actually relatively short necked, but on the long necked ones with then a long head as well, my guess is probably not, simply because it would cause them real problems with balance rather than getting the mass off the ground. So I don't think there's fundamentally a problem with them, gaining weight in the sense that they can't fly when they couldn't eat, when they've eaten something relatively big. Though I'm led to believe that is actually a genuine issue for condors. They can eat so much they can't take off. But yeah, I doubt they were holding it in their beaks. I don't think anyone's modelled it. But given that a lot of the argument over the big Azhdarchids flying comes down to could they even get in the air, or exactly how far and how much you have to tweak the wings to get sufficient lift to get them off the ground, or balance that forward point of centre of mass. Yeah, picking up something heavy, tens of kilos, probably not.
Because these aren't the filter feeders, are they? These are the ones, the Quetzalcoatlus is the big giraffe type thing that goes around and eating things on
with
a
2 metre head and a 2.5 metre neck, on a torso that's not much bigger than mine. Yeah, they're weird. Let's be honest. But yeah, basically, I doubt it. I think it would cause real problems for them.
Thank you, Matthew. I will find another question now. This one I thought was a nice one from Don. Is it possible that some, many dinosaurs or their contemporaries would have been edible for humans? Because modern dinosaurs are edible for humans. So having them for our Christmas
it's not
Day
very
meal.
common, but I mean, I've had crocodile and alligator, and you can get alligator without too much hassle. I think most things are themselves edible, not most of everything. But you look at relatively large-bodied vertebrates, there are not that many that are toxic to eat fundamentally, particularly when you talk about things like muscle tissue. Even things that can be highly venomous or toxic, so think of things like, cane toads, for example, which kill loads of Australian wildlife because they're very toxic, but those glands at the back of the head. So if you don't touch them, or if you just rip the legs off, and I believe there's local crows have worked this out, the meat is actually fine. So I really wouldn't expect that to be any different for most dinosaurs. Crocs are edible, birds are edible. They're not doing lots of weird things. Yes, there would obviously have been some species which are eating some weird plant and then happen to store the toxins, or have become very toxic as a predator defense or something. But fundamentally, I'd be very surprised if we couldn't eat the vast majority of them, if not all of them.
It might be
how nice it would be is another matter.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a case that, some meats, like rabbits or something, if you try and eat rabbit too much, you use up all your B vitamins trying to eat it and not get any from the meat, so you can actually give yourself a nutritional deficiency just by eating one thing.
Carnivore and livers and particularly things like polar bears are famously toxic because they've got too much vitamin D, I think it might be. Might be B. But anyway, yeah, there's things which in quantities and over... Right, but I think if, you transported to the Mesozoic and just randomly ate a chunk of Diplodocus, I think you'd be fine.
Excellent. Let me just get another question up here. We've got one from Edwards. Has tech, as in technology, immensely changed the way paleontologists work with each other? Do you guys all hang out in virtual meetings for way longer than planned, like I often do at work? That's what Edward wants to know. And obviously that isn't the case, Dave, because I think with the little noise that your laptop makes every time you move your head, I think that...
it's clearly just you, because I've not heard any of this tapping and noise that you're complaining about at all, so I don't know what it is.
Okay, it's my fault.
Do we all hang out in meetings for hours? No, much as I'd like to, because I'm too busy. On the rare occasions I can get hold of my colleagues to actually speak to them about something, it's always such a rush, you never get through half of what you want to talk about. I mean, at this point, I'd say while scrolling across the bottom, do check out Dave and Izzy's books. I have a big chunk of a chapter on my most recent book about technology and paleontology. And so the short version is, among the stuff that I think people usually think of, like X-rays and scanning and digital reconstructions and stuff, it's all helped a bit. And it's letting us do stuff better and faster than we could do before. But I'm not sure... as a field as a whole, it's been some kind of massive game changer. Like people doing mass reconstructions or modelling of physiology, it's massively, massively helped. Or or doing skull 3D analyses to see how strong their bite was. It's obviously massively helped there. Has it transformed the whole of paleo? No. The one thing that has is what we're doing now, or what you said, just the very fact that we're all online. The example I give in the book is when I was an undergraduate years ago, but not that long ago.
Time. It was late Cretaceous.
Stone tablets and wax. But like we would be set an essay. You're like, write about lion conservation in East Africa, and you went to the library and you physically pulled off these books off the shelf and went through them, and you would look up the word lion, and it would give you a list of papers that year that had lion in the title or lion as a keyword. And then you'd check Panthera leo, because not everyone might use lion. They might have used Panthera leo, and then they might have used P. leo. And then you need to look up conservation, and then you need to look up East Africa, and then you need to look up Kenya. And by the end of a couple of hours, you might have a full list of papers that you might want to try and find. And then you start looking for them on the shelves. Journal of Conservation, right? Journal of Conservation, Volume 17, Issue 16, page 54. Oh, that doesn't look very interesting. Put it back. Next one. And after a day, you might have 4 or 5 papers in hand, and a list of another half dozen you'd emailed or given to the librarian to email to another library and ask them if they had a copy, and then they could photocopy it and send it to us. And at the end of a week, I might have 10 papers, of which about 4 were relevant. And now I go into Google Scholar and I type Lion Conservation Kenya, East Africa, and it gives me a list that I can download, most of which are instantly accessible. And if not, the email address of the author who I can email and ask for a copy is there. And within 15 minutes, I've got 10 times as much work as I used to acquire in literally 5-6 hours of work. Yeah. And that is a game changer for doing research, particularly when with paleo, we're regularly working with stuff that's 200 years old. We had a little conversation about this the other day. What's the oldest paper you've cited? Was doing a round on Twitter. I think Graham Lloyd started it. And yeah, 1800s, even 1700s. Getting hold of those, it used to be impossible. There might be half a dozen copies in the world. And now someone scanned it and put it online, and I've got a copy of it on my laptop. It's great.
I mean, you say it's great. It just sounds like, it's just... Like, I used to have fun because I did a degree. It's a science degree, but that science was geography. Shut up. And because some of it was statistics and proper science and difficult. I had to do the same things. If we were doing glaciers, I had to work out, go and read papers on that. However, some of it was about, conceptual ideas of space. And the game was that you went into the library and see what papers were left by everybody else. And then somehow work those into the paper. I got some of my best grades trying to read papers that everybody thought were useless and actually used them. Because they weren't referenced on any of the other materials because I was late to the library, and I managed to write a decent essay on the subject using material otherwise that somebody else had read. You were doing that a few years after me, so we're talking less than 20 years ago. Yeah,
this is how everyone researched everything. So that is an insane level of change.
We've got another question about technology, so why don't we bring up Sierra? And I'm just going to... So we got Sierra here, says, could artificial intelligence be helpful to paleontologists? I'm thinking specifically about the data compilation related tasks that Dave has talked about. This is what I think.
When you trust it... So come back in another century. I mean, that's it. I can genuinely conceive of, a couple of decades from now, by the end of my career, we can get it to do things like, we had John Hutchinson on, and John's done some amazing work with the 3D modelling of like muscles and joints and how that allows things to move and what the range of motion is. I can imagine we can get to the point where we can automate that. You can go into a museum. There's a skeleton. You get your iPhone out and LiDAR it. We can already do that with the new iPhones. And there's your dinosaur model. And the AI is smart enough to cut the ground off. Go, okay, that bone's missing, so we mirror that one. That bone's missing, so we mirror that one. That one's bent in half, but all the others aren't, so we'll straighten that one. And then I know there should be a muscle here to here, and those are the points that it joins. So I'll put the muscle on, and that one, and all the hundreds of others. And then here's the range of motion, and here's how fast it turns, and here's how fast it accelerates, and this is how fast it can run. Job done. I can honestly see that. The kind of stuff that we're still mostly doing at the moment, of checking minutiae on skeletons and counting things like teeth, and is that 2 teeth or 1, and is that emerging or not, and is that alveoli open or partially covered? This requires a level of skill and judgment that something that currently isn't sure how many teeth or hands or fingers humans have, not anytime soon. No.
It's 10.
Yeah, I really think it will eventually. But the other thing that comes with this, and this is a point I've made before, but I think it'll be true here as well, is remember, AI requires training and it requires lots of input and that requires lots of money. And all the stuff that we always do with paleo is always leftovers, or we're using someone else's thing because we can. So when we CT scan skulls, or when we use finite element analysis to test bite force and stuff, these are all things developed for something else, and we've co-opted it. No AI company in the world is going to have the time and money, and no grant body is going to hand it over for the tens or hundreds of millions required that it could automate like collection of phylogenetic data to do an analysis. Because no one's going to build anything that does anything like that, and we're not going to be able to afford it. So we're not going to get it.
I'm imagining scenarios where we sort of, bully billionaires to try and get, somebody interested enough to just spend all their money appropriately on science. But, it would be so good if we could just, if you could have like teams of PhD students all paid to be PhD students going through all of the collections, making sure all the measurements
this
are
is
standardized.
What you want,
yeah.
And basic stuff like we even well-known animals. I've got a couple of undergrad students looking at things for their dissertation at the moment. Yeah, and they're like, oh well, how'd you get this stuff? It's like, well, it's pretty much not out there. Gorgosaurus, we just mentioned, there's at least 5 or 6 and probably more like 8 or 9 good Gorgosaurus skeletons just in the Tyrrell Museum. And I think a couple of them were described by Phil Curry back in the late 90s. People assume we've just got photos and illustrations and diagrams and long detailed descriptions and codings for every good specimen that we found. And we don't. That stuff doesn't exist. And we desperately need it. But doing that is vast amounts of work, and you'll never get any credit for it, so no one does it.
I know. I mean, we need to culturally change the idea of what a midlife crisis is, so that everybody, instead of buying fast cars or just like changing, going to live in the countryside in a cabin, just goes into museums and wants to get really nerdy and measury, and then it will all be sorted.
Or don't buy a Harley Davidson, just give us 20 grand. That'll go quite a long way.
That'd be good, wouldn't it? You buy a PhD student to measure things for you. That sounds a bit dodgy, so let's move on. So, we've got Steve, who says, my fossils are always very dark brown or even black, no matter what type of rock contains it. Is it common for fossil dealers to add dye or tint to fossils, or is this a natural phenomenon?
I've never heard of anything like that. Fossils come in all kinds of different colours, but bones are often dark because the way they absorb things. But yeah, if anyone's seen any of the stuff from Mongolia or northern China, it's white. It can be even very bright white or tinted kind of yellowy cream, but it's in no way, shape or form brown or black. But then an awful lot of stuff, so most of the marine stuff, so all the Holzmaden stuff from southern Germany, there's so many ichthyosaurs from there, jet black. All of the
trilobites.
Yes, also them, but not bony Morocco. Usually. This means Jurassic Coast, but I got there in the end. In the UK, that stuff is almost always dark. The Morrison and stuff like Hell Creek and stuff like Dinosaur Provincial Park tends to be dark brown. So I think on average, most dinosaurs are quite dark, and therefore probably most vertebrate fossils are quite dark, but there's certainly tons of exceptions. But I've never heard of anyone staining them. Yeah, you'd paint a cast to look like the originals, but actively staining a fossil, never heard of it.
Yeah, it does sound a bit weird. I suspect.
I think most of them are dark, so you're buying dark stuff because that's what most of it is.
Yeah. And I think they're probably preferred because, the stuff that sells is a stuff that is dark.
All the stuff that they've just got. Because again, the Mongolian and Chinese stuff is usually illegal. The Brazilian stuff is usually illegal. That's the pale stuff. Solnhofen bones, Archaeopteryx and all the pterosaurs, that's often very pale. But it's often very, very, very expensive as well. I saw a single pterosaur wing going for €100,000 recently. People
Steve can afford that. You don't know Steve.
He's probably one of our like $5 a month people. So he's a great man. I'm sure you get yourself a nice pterosaur wing for your birthday, Steve. I think that's a good day. It's only
and then get me one.
Exactly.
So right, so that's probably why.
Okay, I've got another question. Well, not another question here from Anna's got a question, which I quite like this question. The KT extinction. There's a hypothesis why mammals did better than dinosaurs and other reptiles is because they have the ability to hibernate. Do you have any thoughts on that? She basically wants to know, is there, good backing of science? She was having an argument with her husband, but I couldn't fit it in the little chat.
Oh, so that's important. So... Let's see if we can stimulate a divorce. So, at least a temporary separation, just in time for Christmas. So
over the KT extinction, that's a decent
At least
thing.
when we get into other reptiles, I'm immediately suspicious because there's lots of reptiles that hibernate. So if hibernation is the key to getting through,
tortoises famously on Blue Peter.
Tortoises, yeah, and some frogs and other things do as well. Frogs all vanish, go to the bottom of the pond, but toads burrow themselves, etc. Did any dinosaurs hibernate? I would be surprised if some didn't. Again, it's one of those things that we can't really know, but there appear to be, alligators are doing something like that. If lizards and snakes and alligators and various mammals are doing it, I can't think of any birds that do, but you at least get things like
kiwis do a similar thing, but that's usually when they're laying eggs. So I don't think
they might. But you've got torpor going on in hummingbirds. So torpor is basically a form of mini hibernation over much shorter periods, usually overnight. So things like harvest mice and dormice do this because they're such high energy animals, and hummingbirds, again similar, just burn through that when they're basically not operating. They shut down. So they really do slow down and almost go into hibernation, but just overnight and then fire up again the next morning rather than doing it for 3 months. But they can do it, or at least something very similar to it. So again, if we're seeing this turn up in multiple different lineages and things that are pretty close related to dinosaurs, it would be weird if some dinosaurs didn't do this. And we've got some evidence of things like thescelosaurs burrowing. So that doesn't necessarily mean they were hibernating, but they're already in the right kind of place to do that. You're already underground. You're already more protected. You can keep your temperature going.
Are they the corkscrew ones?
We haven't got corkscrew burrows. No.
Oh, okay. I thought there's some animal with a corkscrew burrow.
Yeah, there's some big Australian monitor lizards that do these insane corkscrew burrows, and there are fossil beavers that do as well, but not the dinosaurs that I know of. So would hibernating help mammals survive? Probably, but not amazingly. Again, the KT wasn't something that affected a few areas for a couple of months. This is going to be decades of devastation. And so, again, that will probably help, but I doubt it's any massive part of multiple mammal lineages getting through and none of the dinosaurs getting through. So it may have helped some mammals do better. Is that the reason dinosaurs went and mammals didn't? Or like the tipping point line? No, I don't think it was.
I mean, this is following on from it's another KT extinction question. It's from Tim. Now, I don't know if you know this because, Dave's not an astronomer, but he might know this. So with the size of the asteroid and the impact crater size, could have the impact change the Earth's position in space? And would it have been a big enough knock to affect its axis effectively? So could have a day, because you've moved it, been shorter 64 million years ago?
So I think days were shorter then because of the rotation speed of the Earth. I believe we've slowed down. So it used to be something more like 20 hours, but I can't remember when 20 hours was. And as you pointed out, not an astronomer or astrophysicist, so this is not exactly my question. But my understanding was in the Mesozoic, it was rather shorter. And it was rather brighter because the moon was a bit closer, so it would have been a bit brighter as well at night. But I think with the asteroid impact, the basic thing is no, because it's one of those issues of where you're just dealing with unbelievable numbers. And so, the asteroid was supposedly about the size of Mount Everest. A lovely factoid I got not too long ago, which I don't know if it's true, but I can easily imagine it, is if you scaled a snooker ball, professional snooker ball, up to the size of the Earth, that would have a rougher surface than the Earth does. Yeah. And we think of them as being unbelievably perfectly smooth to the touch. Because basically, yes, even a mountain that's a few miles high, across the diameter of a few thousand miles, it basically doesn't exist. So yeah, the asteroid that hit was, a few million tons, but against trillions of trillions of trillions of tons of Earth, doesn't really move it.
No. I just want to underline...
It's shooting at it,
I got to interview an astronaut, Dave, who's like, imagine, there are kids who want to be paleontologists and the other kids who want to be astronauts. The astronauts are better. Anyway, and he was like going on about it, but he pointed out how far the moon was, and he said you can fit all of the planets touching in between us and the moon.
Yeah.
It's that far away. It's a long way away, guys.
Yeah, and Jupiter's quite big as well. That's the other thing.
It's pretty big. Saturn, not small.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite a big distance, that. The fact that we sent people there is crazy. But yeah, and apparently as well, the moon, that used to, before the Earth became like a proper planet, but it used to be part of the Earth mass, and then there was a big
we were
impact
hit by something and it knocked it off. Yeah.
And do you know the way they proved that? Is that when they got the moon rock back to Earth, it had the word Earth written through it.
Like a stick of rock.
Merry Christmas. So we'll move on. But so basically, days were smaller, possibly, but don't know about 65 million years ago because that might be a bit too recent. But also that even though it was a massive impact that affected all life, it probably didn't affect the planet rotation so much. Why don't we go to Flappy Flaps again? So Josh wants to know, any idea why pterosaurs didn't diversify? Like, birds have moved into fully terrestrial and aquatic lives despite increased competition with mammals, but pterosaurs just stick to the same body plan. They just do the same sort of thing. What's going on?
How long we got?
We got probably another 20 minutes, Dave. So, enjoy.
Okay, I might be able to fill it. Very, very long and complicated question. There's a lot to unpack in that sort of thing. So, really, though, what it probably comes down to is pterosaurs are built in a way that you can't particularly change what they're doing with regards to their arms and legs, because the wing membrane is fully integrated with the two. Whereas birds, the wing is not integrated even with the body, because, you can run your hand up the side and pull the feathers out. It doesn't actually connect.
If this was a normal episode, I'd call it You Can't Tickle a Pterosaur.
Yeah. So, it's a fundamentally separate unit, which means that any evolutionary selective pressure that are acting on the wing of a bird, if even if it stops flying, you can still do something with that. Whereas with pterosaurs, that's kind of not really the same case. So, although pterosaurs did diversify in quite a few ways, given what they do, and we see different arm and leg lengths and proportions within them, and then shape of the bones that's giving them better flight capability or better terrestrial capability, and things like this, they're still kind of stuck to the fact that they've got to have a wing spar supporting a wing membrane that hits the ankle in order to get off the ground and still fly. So that's part one. Part two, a lot of the birds that have gone on to do things that pterosaurs didn't have done it in places where there's not a lot of competition. So, yes, there are things like rhea and ostrich and kiwi. Well, actually, kiwi is probably a less good idea, but there's things like rhea and ostrich and cassowary knocking around. But what you mostly get for flightless birds is they're on islands. They're on islands in the middle of nowhere where competition is massively reduced. So, kiwi, kakapo, great auk even though they've gone to aquatic, but they've lost that flight capability. Flightless things in Hawaii, flightless things in Madagascar, flightless things in the Galapagos. These are all Madagascar. These are all places where competition is fundamentally reduced. And those places don't produce fossils. They're usually volcanic islands. So they erupt out of the ground, they hang around for a few million years ago, and then they explode volcanically or get subducted and then pulled under into the mantle and get disintegrated. Even if that doesn't happen, there's not lots of lovely water flow and a nice sedimentary lake to bury things in.
I'm
so
thinking a nice bit
their
of
fossil
pyroclastic
record...
flow, Dave. Pyroclastic flow, dust settles, beautiful, lovely book ones if you get pyroclastic flow. Volcanoes can be our friends. But
yes, as well,
not
as we've
ones.
seen from Liao Ning. But again, going out to, where do we get flightless birds? That's probably where we'll get flightless pterosaurs. Those things don't leave a fossil record. It's not a surprise we don't have them. So I am 99.9% convinced that we had loads of different flightless pterosaur lineages. They're all in places where we don't find fossils. Yeah. They never preserved anything, so they don't exist. And then the increased competition from mammals bit, that's kind of true now, but things that are settled into niches can do well. But in the aftermath of the KT, birds were doing very well. Lots of lineage. Well, they did very badly initially, but post that, there was a period where it looked like birds might be taking over before the mammals really got up to speed. And it certainly took them a while. But in terms of, in particular, things like the aquatic lineages, yeah, you've got things like auks that can fly, well, badly because they go, wings going absolutely manic in the air, and ducks. But they can do that and they can swim. The wing that will allow a pterosaur to fly will not allow a pterosaur to swim. And you can see how lineages like those birds could go on to be aquatic lineages in a way that a pterosaur can't. I think if you're going to end up with an aquatic pterosaur like a penguin or like a grebe or something, or Hesperornis even in the Cretaceous, it's, again, going to be an island environment where there's basically no terrestrial predators and they can have the very long period to fundamentally change that wing structure massively in order to be capable in water and not on land. And even then it might be tough, because feathers give birds properties that pterosaurs just don't have. The one group that I'm surprised at is we don't really have predatory pterosaurs, by which I mean the equivalent of eagles and falcons and owls and things like that are fundamentally foot-based attacking things. And certainly I can't think of any pterosaur with a big curved beak, an obvious flesh-ripping animal. I am surprised they didn't get into those niches.
But they've got very little back legs. I mean, the advantage of being a dinosaur is
because they've got big strong feet. Yeah, so and then obviously grabbing something with your hands doesn't work when you still need to fly with them. I mean, so
there should have been one with like an amazing spine that could absorb impacts that just envelops things and then drops. That would have been cool.
But the difference being, so particularly when you think of things like owls, where they do kind of land on things. Now, pterosaurs could do that because, again, you don't have to grab it and kill it with your feet so much as just stomp on it. That's my owl I got from Namibia.
Nice. Got to have Athena around at all times. She's scary.
Yep. Oh yeah, hang on. We're playing that game.
He's off, everyone. Sorry.
That's my owl from Athens.
Hang on, I'll try and make you a bit bigger. There you go. Look at that. It's proper Athenian owl, that. Nice.
Yeah, damn right. So, yeah, complicated question, lots of different things going on. I think it's less that pterosaurs were bad at it and more that birds are very good at it. They've got an ex-aptation, a pre-adaptation. The way their wings are built and the way they're separate from the body allows them to do things that pterosaurs just couldn't.
Including sexy plumage as well, because I don't think pterosaurs had that. I want to add to this, though. I was thinking, I know what I'll do. I'll Google some of the stuff that Dave's talking about and flash pictures up, because that'd be useful. So what I wanted to do was look up orcs, and this is what I got. So thank you, Google, for just...
AUK, not ORC.
Yeah, I know, but that's my spelling.
Puffins.
Puffins are good.
Yeah.
We like puffins, although they're disappointing unless they're in breeding season, if you want to have a look at them. So here we have another question. I think it should be... has that gone up? No, that's a different one. Here we go. We're gonna... No, that's we've done that one, Izzy. Shush. Right. No, that's not it. Hang on. It's because... Hang on. So, there's a good one. We've done that one.
We've done that one.
It's because they all go out of order when I click on them. Have we done this one?
Yes.
Yeah, we've done that one. Oh, see, this is why people sort of complain to me. We can do this one by Sierra. Okay. it's her way of asking for your favourite colour. But what colour do you like to imagine most dinosaurs to look like? Now, I think this is the thing that I think. We've gone into T-Rex being blue with white spots, so it fits into the snow. And I would like that very much indeed. Dave's going to tell you that they're going to be very boring and have a light underbelly and a thing so they blend into the background.
Probably,
and all the rest of it. But I think Dave should lie.
Louise Ray paints his Tyrannosaurs blue with white trimming, so you're not the only one. I mean, what is my favourite colour? I have a bunch. I really like green, particularly kind of bottle green. There's a reason I'm in a green jumper with a newly painted green office behind me. And I had, who was it? Krista Piazza did some artwork for me the other day, and he said, like, what dinosaur do you want? What colour do you want? And I said, ask for a platysaur, because I didn't have any sauropodomorphs. And I said, can you do it green? Because I think every paleo artist is so afraid of painting dinosaurs green because it's such a horrible cliche that they're all green, that they never paint them green, or at least not very much. And I'm like, but they're big reptiles hiding in forests. Green is a pretty reasonable colour, actually. I think we've gone a little too far there. And it's not like people never do this, but I think it has become we can't do it green because we don't want to play into those awful 1950s stereotypes of them just being green. And I'm like, yeah, but I bet a whole bunch of them were. So I'm really quite in favour of green dinosaurs, just not lurid lime green, basically.
That's good, and it points to your favourite colour. I don't know what my favourite colour though is. I'm very disappointed because I don't know if you hang on. I'll search my light round so you can sort of see my.
I mean, colours. I like that's a bit olivey, that one.
This is basically I found it's very upsetting. But I found that almost all colours, if it looks like it lives in the bottom of a pond, it'll suit my skin tone. Is basically what I've discovered in my old age. So that's disappointing.
Brown and scummy.
Exactly, that's me, guys. That's me. So here we have a question from Shane. Are there any mountainous rock-hopping dinosaurs known or speculated akin to some modern sheep and goats locations? You know, because the goats are crazy. The way that they can.
So the one that did the rounds on this for quite a long time were the pachycephalosaurs, and the logic being that we find lots of heads, but we don't find anything else. And obviously the heads are going to survive because they've got the giant the dome in particular. So you've got these giant domes of bone, and they survive, and they're often really bashed up. So they presumably travelled quite a long way in water to get to the point where they were buried. And we can't find the rest of the skeletons pretty much ever.
Those ones, yeah.
Yeah, here we go, pachycephalosaurs, lovely. So the logic being, well, if they're around in good enough numbers that we keep finding the domes, and they're around in the floodplains and flatter areas, we should find skeletons sooner or later, and we keep not. So maybe they're mostly hanging around in hills and mountainous areas, which is why we don't tend to find them, because, of course, that's a bad area for deposition. But the giant dome of bone would survive well, and that can be washed hundreds of miles and still survive and then become a fossil.
And I like this idea because you got goats like to butt heads and pachycephalosaurs like to butt heads.
And I think that was probably fitting into it at least a little bit.
And if you know anybody who's into climbing, they are stubborn.
Yeah, and they wear big hats as well to hit headbutt each other. So, and I was always quite happy with that logic, personally, that I've been admonished by pachycephalosaur researchers going, that went out years ago, why are you still believing that? But the fact remains, we still do have very few skeletons of them. There are places where they're definitely not, so there's a couple of amazing ones have come out of Mongolia, which is, again, very flat and deserty and not big and mountainous. So even if many of them were doing that, far from all of them, though again we get sheep and goats in some of those regions too. But I think basically the short answer is no, not really, but for exactly the original problem, which is those aren't the places that form fossils. Mountainous things do not have nice slow rivers carefully depositing lots of very fine sand on a body that's washed into it. A goat falls off a cliff, it's going to shatter on the rocks below and then be eaten. And if there is any kind of deposition, it's a rock fall or some gushing stream from the snow melt. It is not a river. And again, that's why we have so many dinosaurs from Dinosaur Provincial Park, which is basically a swamp in an estuary, and we don't have any from, 200 miles west, which is the lower slopes of the Rockies. Because of that. So they probably existed, but we can't really find them. Or at least, it's the kind of thing we're going to really, really struggle to ever find.
Now, talking of, the flat mountains flat mountains, well done.
The flat mountains,
Of Mongolia, we got a question about velociraptors and other dromaeosaurs. Did dromaeosaurs use their massive toe claws to slash at their prey? Do we think that the toe claws are used that way, or did they have some other function? That's from Charles. So first point, it's not an either-or question, which I think I've commented on this many times before. This is a trap that not just the general public, but professional paleontologists, who I think should know better, fall into. Cat claws really ultimately are kind of gripping claws, because that's their big thing. Particularly the big cat, they jump on the back of an animal, then they need to weigh it down or climb under and bite the nose, bite the throat, hold them down. That's what leopards and lions and tigers and big things like this are doing. Would I want to get scratched by one? No, that would be extraordinarily painful. So just because you're good at gripping doesn't mean you can't slash. Just because you're good at slashing doesn't mean you can't grip. I think big cats are grippers more than slashers, but that doesn't mean they're not very good at that other job too. Having been scratched by a small tiger, it was plenty painful enough. Why were you scratched by a small tiger?
It was a very small tiger. No, this was back when I was working at London Zoo, and the female Sumatran, I think this was a long time ago, tiger rejected her cubs and they got hand-reared, and I was lucky enough to be introduced to one of them. So I have a photo of me with a massive amount of hair, age 16, 17, with a baby tiger cub. He was like 3-4 months old, but he went and stuck his claws into my leg and it hurt.
Yeah.
And then he bit my friend and she had to get a tetanus shot.
Tigers are great.
Yes. So going back to dromaeosaurs, the original idea is that these were a slashing weapon. They were there to rip open things, and that's what they're killing them. And that's what Crichton talks about in Jurassic Park. The shift in recent years has been that actually it's more of a puncture weapon, and it is there to stick into something to stop it getting away. You're stuck to it. And I think in particular, again, as people have cottoned on to the idea, going back to Gorgosaurus, that they're not just tackling things much, much bigger than themselves and they're trying to disembowel it before it gets away. They're grabbing little things. And if you watch things like... I saw a really cool video of a sparrowhawk in Bristol the other day catching a pigeon under a car. Both of them were on the ground and the pigeon walked under the car and the sparrowhawk just ran round and grabbed it. So a very odd form of predation. Is that your front doorbell?
And we're going to take a little pause right now and we'll be back. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. That was the Labour Party making sure I vote in the next election. Anyway, but it's, stopping try to pin me down there with their political clause.
Very good.
And getting me to do stuff. So,
but going back, look at videos of things like sparrowhawks or falcons and stuff in general. And they're grabbing little things and they're really trying to stick their claws into and through them. Not because it's an amazing way of killing something, but it stops it getting away. Because animals are incredibly resilient, and grim though it is, yes, there's videos you can watch of wildebeest with half their guts hang out and they just run off. And okay, it probably kills them later, but it doesn't kill them very quickly. Animals are really resilient to stuff like this. That's not a very good way of being a predator. So their claws were probably more gripping than slashing. And that's, again, almost certainly because they're targeting small things. And if you're grabbing a small mammal or baby dinosaur or big lizard and you grabbed it, you want to keep hold of it. So they're trying to stick it into or through it.
If you're fighting another velociraptor for a lady velociraptor, or you're two lady velociraptors fighting another velociraptor, you want a bit of
I think that's where the hands are going to be more important than the feet.
Okay, yeah. Possibly.
Because they've got that reach. Yes, cassowaries kick and ostriches kick, but they're also bipeds. Kicking when you're a biped is not often a great strategy, but if you've got two big sharp hands covered in massive claws as well, and the big claws on velociraptor hands are bigger than their feet claws, that's a pretty valid tactic.
Even the big claw, they're even bigger than that. Hang on, I'm gonna Google this guy
because I've got a Velociraptor. I've got a cast of Velociraptor arm and a cast of Velociraptor foot from the same Velociraptor, and you can line them up.
Wow,
they're not they're not as long, but they are fatter. So they're really big, strong claws. They're different shapes, so it's kind of hard to compare.
I can't. I'm trying to find one from the trouble is if you Google
search like Velociraptor skeleton. Don't search because then you'll get hundreds of Jurassic Park images.
But the trouble is I've got Deinonychus here and it's hard to tell. Yeah. But I will pop him up if I can. Oh gosh, hang on. I mean, just everything's fine. Right, okay. There he is, just coming up now. Add stage. There we go. So you can sort of see there that
I'm not sure how good a hands we've got for Deinonychus, which is why was hoping to get
you can see that they're long and pointy, but I still think that those are just, they don't look real. Those look like
the point being they're not that different.
No.
Oh, here's a decent one.
Oh, let's see if I can get you to. If you want to try sharing, Dave.
Share and enjoy. Hang on, it's being.
If you do a share screen. I mean, now I just want to say, as the person who regularly edits this podcast and puts it together, this is why we don't do live unedited stuff, because this is what happens. We get interested in something, go off on a tangent.
Yeah.
Everything's great.
So here's Ballure, which may or may not be a dromaeosaur. People have argued about it extensively, but you can really see here that actually the toe claws are pretty much the same size as the hand claws.
Oh yeah. So
they're not massively different. And again, we can argue about exactly what do you mean by big, because there's different lengths, there's different thicknesses, there's different degrees of curvature. But fundamentally, hand and feet claws in Velociraptor, that's not a bad cast. Yeah, they're pretty similar. So
I mean, but you don't have the angle to them.
No, you don't.
So cool.
But again, this is the focusing on one thing and ignoring other things.
Well, I suppose the reason it's cocked back like that is so it stays sharp when it's running and moving and things like that. And therefore, the hand claws, which it's not using as much to run and climb and everything else as much as its back legs, they're going to stay sharp anyway. So they're probably worse. Cool. This is an amazing question. I want you to answer this question from Robert. How did sauropods breathe? How? Wouldn't the air capacity of the trachea almost be as much as the lungs? The air from the lungs would never get expelled?
Yeah, there's a big dead airspace problem with sauropods, and I have no idea how they get over it. I hope the sauropod people have a good idea about how they get over it, because I don't. And that is almost all I've got to say on the subject. Yes, it has bothered me more than one occasion. It hasn't bothered me enough to go and look into it, so I don't know the answer. But yes, it's absolutely an issue.
Wow. I mean, could they have had blowholes like whales and stuff out the side of them?
That's not over. No, that's not going to fix that problem. I mean, the only thing I can say is that, birds get away with a hell of a lot. You get these syringes, these enormously elongated and complicated trachea. And okay, it's on a much, much smaller scale. I get that. But you still get them where they're like 5 or even 10 times longer than they should be to go from mouth down a long neck or something like a swan or a crane and then to the lungs. So it clearly does happen, but yeah, I don't know how you deal with something like Mamenchisaurus or Brachiosaurus and the dead air problem it would have.
Don't birds have a slightly different sort of like lung system than we do?
They're circular breathers, and so are the sauropods, or so are the dinosaurs in general. So they're basically, ours go in the windpipe, out into the lungs, and then back the exact same route that it came. Whereas they're going basically down into an air sac, into the lungs, and then back out. So it goes A to B to C to back to the windpipe.
Ooh.
So it's a circle. It's going in and out the same
If they smell something bad, that's going to be in them for a while. They're going to smell it again when it comes out again, aren't they?
Yeah, but we do that.
Yeah, but I think ours, we can, when you're driving down the road and you get a load of manure coming through.
Yeah.
Right. and then you can hold your breath sometimes and get away, and then just like blow it out and it's all gone. Yeah. Whereas they're gonna have that longer, I reckon. The manure smell. Yeah, that's the difficulty with being a dinosaur. That's true. Talking of the difficulty of being a dinosaur, it's not as difficult as being a tyrannosaur in Australia because there aren't any, really. This is what Michael's finding. What do you think the likelihood is that tyrannosaurs made their way into the southern continent and continue diversifying, and there is an Australian tyrannosaur waiting to be found? He's so hopeful.
Well, there's a pubic boot.
There's like
so the end expansion of the pubis that was described as being probably Tyrannosaurian from Australia. And it really looks like a Tyrannosaur one. It's got a bunch of unique features that only Tyrannosaurs have. So you're in this classic game of what is more likely? The Tyrannosaurs got down there and diversified and we just haven't found them yet. Or they didn't get down there and there's a random theropod that happens to have evolved an incredibly Tyrannosaur-like pubis. And of course, neither of those is a particularly satisfying answer. And it's impossible to pick between the two. It's at least possible they got down there. Obviously, other northern lineages like ankylosaurs get down there. If they can get down there, it doesn't seem to be any particular reason that the tyrannosaurs couldn't. But at the same time, we haven't found any. But we don't have that many dinosaurs from Australia. We haven't dug up that much stuff. This is one where, honestly, it's just a complete guess. And who knows? Come back in 10 years and we might have found 3. Come back in 50 years and we might not have found any.
I believe Michael's actually working on his PhD at the moment, so he's doing stuff. He's one.
Well,
of the
he can bloody dig it up himself and stop asking me what I think.
I think he's trying to. He just wants to know if you think it's likely. Is he wasting his time? Is there a reason why they wouldn't have been down there? I think is.
I mean, there's no obvious reason to think that they didn't. I mean, yeah, they don't appear to have got into South America or Africa, really, but then they're probably competing with other big established things like the Carcharodontosaurs at this point. Is the best that I can do. Animals get into places that they shouldn't and don't get into places that they should. It's confusing. Well, it is. Talk about Spinosaurs. We basically don't have Spinosaurs in North America. But we've got them in East Asia, Europe and Africa and South America. How the hell do you get to South America from any of those places without going through North America? But apparently they managed it. Yeah.
Or they just, stayed clear of any, water and other features which they love in other places. So
yeah, I know.
Anyway.
Or they just got through North America very quickly and didn't hang around. They're all so unlikely.
Now, I love the fact that almost all of our listeners put caveats in so Dave doesn't shout at them. So creating dinosaurs in the vein of Jurassic Park wouldn't work.
No.
Would it be plausible that a dodo could be recreated? Gary's seen some videos he's sceptical of the internet of people trying to recreate a dodo, and he's wondering about your thoughts on the subject.
Very possibly. So the difference with things like dodos and thylacines and stuff like that is they're much, much, much more recently extinct. We can get, if not complete genomes, very, very, very large chunks of the genome for them, and they've got relatively close relatives that are still alive now that could provide fill-in genes or, more importantly, surrogates for eggs or gestation or whatever. But we're still insanely long way away from being able to do anything like that in the short term. And probably in the medium term and probably in the long term, because it's just so damn complicated. So anyone who's saying, oh, we're going to de-extinction mammoths in even 20 years, and I've heard stuff like that, that's one of those things that's been 20 years away for 50 years, and it's still way more than 20 years away. And with things like mammoths, it's like, okay, what are you going to breed them with? What's your gestation animal going to be? Oh, an elephant. Oh, well, they're not endangered at all. If we've got the technology to start saving elephants, I'd start saving elephants rather than producing mammoths.
But look at that face. Wouldn't you want that? Imagine if they became we brought them back and they just became an actual, pest. And they were just clogging up the motorways. That'd be amazing. Their little face.
In Mauritius. I'm not sure they've got many motorways in Mauritius.
Okay. But we could reintroduce them to London. Ooh, I made myself.
So yeah, possible, maybe. Plausible, no. It's just not. a thing that's going to happen anytime soon at all.
Now, do we have time for one more, or should that be our Christmas? Because we're coming up to an hour. Okay, very quick.
Yeah,
one.
but we paused like 3 times.
I like Shane's one here, which is is there a wet dinosaur?
So none that I know of. I think the closest thing, and I'm sure I'll get yelled at by some colleagues for saying this, but ankylosaurs. Again, first of all, loads of them are found in deserts, not them. But my understanding was from the data we've got, if you look at the non-desert ankylosaurs, most of them, something like over half, are found in coastal environments or coastal deposition or even in marine rocks. So Boreal-Pelter, the famously wonderfully well-preserved one from 7-8 years ago, was like 100 miles out to sea, out beyond the paleo coastline, not the modern coastline. This is a real thing. And partly that appears to be how they die, and bloat and float, so they, big gut full of gas, and then they can float a long way, and then scavengers can't easily eat them because they're covered in armour. But it's probably also, at least in part, because they're hanging around coasts and beaches a fair bit. And so if you wanted to pick an animal that might be able to wade out into water and not float off and be able to bite seaweed or some low plants along the coastline, that would be my pick.
Amazing.
For the record, I don't think that's their niche. I don't think anyone thinks that is their niche. But I think that is the dinosaur that could probably do that a bit. So things like reindeer, and in the UK even red deer, spend a lot of time on beaches. They'll eat quite a bit of seaweed and will even wade out a little bit. Moose famously will do something similar. Moose will dive for some water plant.
Sandcastles.
I know, Bucket and Spade, Punch and Judy show. But yeah, if I wanted an animal that could at least do a little bit of that as a herbivorous dinosaur, I'd be going to some of those things, something like Boreal-Pelter.
I'll be having a look at their nostrils closely and seeing where they are on them.
They have weird, loops in their sinuses between their nostril and their they have like those curly bendy straws inside their heads.
Do you know what that's for? Spitting salt. That's for spitting salt. That's what I reckon. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You probably it's Christmas, so thank you so much for supporting us. Thank you so much for doing that. You're probably going to eat an enormous amount of food now. If you want to embody an ankylosaur, go down to the beach, jump in, and you'll bloat and float, I think is what they've described. Don't do that. Stay listening to Terrible Lizards. We will be back in the new year, won't we, Dave?
Yeah, if I can think of something to talk about.
Yay, we'll find things to talk about. There's always things to talk about.
We've done 9 series. We've done. Who's it? Someone.
We've done a lot.
We've got 100 hours of material now. I've talked quite a lot of dinosaur.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could move on if you like. What would you like? I mean, we've done a lot of
terrible mud.
Terrible mud. Mud and the causes of mud. We can talk about the difference between silt and loam. But yeah, so thank you so much for supporting us. We will be back in the new year. Do keep sending us your questions. And yeah, have a lovely Merry Christmas. Say Merry Christmas and hurrah, Dave, after 3. See, I have to do it like this. They'll see us doing this now. Look at his sceptical face and look. So after 3, Dave. 1, 2, 3.
I thought we were doing Merry Christmas and hurrah. You said we'll say Merry Christmas and hurrah. So are we doing a police squad, let's say Merry Christmas and hurrah? Or are we doing you saying Merry Christmas and this is how professional we are.
1, 2, 3. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And hurrah. Yes!
There we go.
Cheerio, everybody. It's been fabulous.